Xavier.
And I'm Ella.
And we're hosting today's show of the Bulldog Buzz, where we capture the latest news around the city of Green. This Bulldog Buzz is brought to you by the Bulldog Beat, a group of Green students representing grades 6 through 12.
This unique program, designed to train students to become backpack reporters, news anchors, and video technicians, gives kids the opportunity to work with and learn from each other to write news stories, conduct on-camera interviews, edit, shoot, and direct programs that will air on our GCTV Channel 16.
And we're here today to bring you the information our community is buzzing about.
In 2015, the City of Green Division of Fire and Emergency Medical Services have received more calls than any other year. As of 2016, the City of Green Fire Department is doing their best to provide everyone with the services they need.
The fire chief is responsible for carrying out the day-to-day task of running an efficient firefighting organization. And I'd like to introduce today the City of Green's Chief Funai. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. This is really exciting.
Thank you very much for having me.
And it's kind of funny because I remember 3 months ago when Ella, I think, was the one who brought up this topic. She's like, the number of calls have been rising, and I've been hearing a lot of more fire sirens. And so I was the one who had the privilege to get some more information on this, and I met up with you.
Yes.
And so we've already talked about this, but give me just the background information. Like, when did you start to notice the increase in the number of calls?
You know, Xavier, what we've noticed is that we have an increasing number of calls. We have a trend. Mm-hmm. And if you look over time, we average about a 4% increase in the number of calls that we have per year. Okay. Now, we have some years that are more and some years that are less than that 4%. But generally, you know, that has been our average, is a 4% increase. And that's been over a significant amount of time.
Are the calls that you take only fire-related, or do you also take medical calls?
We do both fire and EMS calls. And generally, you know, while I tell you that the calls have been increasing, our percentage of how many are fire calls and how many are EMS calls has stayed about the same. It is always right about 80% EMS and 20%, I say fire, but that 20% is that whole range of things that aren't EMS calls.
Okay. Why do you think the number of calls have been rising?
Good question, Xavier. I think there's a few different reasons behind it. One is we're just a growing city, right? So more people, more problems.
Yeah.
But another thing is the demographic of our city. There's just like all across America, our average age is getting older. And so for the EMS side of things, our medical calls, we tend to run a higher percentage of EMS calls, medical calls, for our geriatric population. So as that becomes a higher percentage of the population of the city, that brings with it some additional calls.
So you're saying there's like more elderly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and another thing that we've seen in the city of Green is that we have some more facilities, assisted living facilities, nursing homes, and those bring with them some additional calls as well.
Okay.
I know that there is a new elderly development being built from Butler Road, I think?
Yes, that's right. And you know, Ella, just an interesting kind of fire department rule of thumb in the industry is we generally count on, when we think about planning and planning for the future and the future growth of the city and those kind of facilities, we count on 1 call per bed per year. So in other words, if there's 80 rooms in that building for assisted living, we would generally count on, over the course of the year, 80 more calls.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were talking about like certain things make the calls rise. Is there a certain time of year that makes the medical calls rise?
That is another good question. You know, it's almost like the City of Green by ourselves, we're a bit too small of a sample size to really show that kind of trend. I think if you looked at all of Summit County, I absolutely think you'd see some of that trend, but we're actually still just small enough that we're, hang with me here, irregular? So I don't know that we see that pattern. Just an example for you. If you look at last year, our busiest day of the week was a Monday, oddly enough, because I would have thought it would have been a weekend.
Right.
And then this year, in 2014, it was Monday. In 2015, our busiest day of the week was Tuesday. So, you know, we're still kind of irregular about some of those sorts of patterns.
Because I know sometimes, like in the winter, with the traffic and
Yes.
snowstorms, there tends to be more, but green doesn't, we're small enough
There certainly can be, but then you say, well, in the summer, then sometimes people are more active.
Okay.
So they're outside and they're riding their dirt bikes and coming up with other ways to get,
Yeah.
you know, to get hurt. So, you know, we might be just a small enough sample size that we don't show some of those
Okay.
trends.
Since the number of calls are rising, is the city of Greene thinking of maybe building another fire station?
Yeah, that is that's quite the issue, actually. In Greene, as Mayor Norton used to like to say, you know, we're building a city. We're a relatively young city, and we have lots of needs. Certainly, from the fire department perspective, that is one of the needs that we would like to address. Is we would like to. One of the things we try to do is decrease that response time. How long it takes from the time that you call 911 to the time that we get firemen or paramedics to your house, and certainly another station could help us with that. From the bigger perspective, one of the things that the city has to juggle, though, is all the other needs that go with it, all the traffic issues, all the stormwater issues, those infrastructure things that a young, growing city has to deal with. So at the fire department, yes, I'd love to say, hey, we have some real needs. We would love to get that third station and address, you know, some more response time issues. But we have to weigh that against, you know, all the other needs of the city.
Yeah, a lot of factors can influence
They can.
whether you decide to build a new building or not.
That's right.
We've talked about the increase in calls.
Yes.
So I know in 2011 and 2013 there was a drop by over 400. What can influence a drop instead of a rise?
You know, what we saw there, and if it's okay with you, I'm going to even go back further. In 2006, we saw another little drop. And so there's a couple of interesting things. As I told you, we have a general trend where our calls increase. Well, in 2006, we started billing for the ambulance service. So if we transported a patient to the hospital, then that would generate a bill for that patient, and that actually decreased the number of calls. Now the trend, it kept increasing, so we caught back up. Then, Ella, specifically what you asked about, between 11 and 13, that was the period of time where the freestanding ERs, the SUMA facility and the Akron General ER were opened. And that actually brought with it a decrease in the number of calls that we got. Some people chose to go to the hospital on their own.
Okay.
So that kind of reset our trend line lower. But as we've learned from after collecting the stats for 2015, we're right back on our trend line, I guess. The percentage increase from 2014 to 2015 was actually just over 5%. So it looks like we're right back on track after that momentary decrease.
And you were saying that you started billing for the ambulance. What was the reason for that?
Yes. You know, the reason is public safety is expensive.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's worth it. I think it's one of our responsibilities as a city, you know, to provide the very best that we can, both on the law enforcement side and the fire EMS rescue side. But it is expensive. So, you know, the city, we have to make determinations, I guess, of what level of coverage do we want. And this just became a method to go about recovering some of the cost, paying for that service. And in the city of Greene, what we do is it's actually, it's called soft billing. So we will bill the residents' insurance company for what revenue we can collect that way, but we do not bill the residents for whatever amount is left over.
Okay.
You know, it's a tricky situation because, you know, your parents are paying taxes,
Yeah.
right? And we expect those taxes to cover that service. But as costs have continued to increase, that was a way to try to offset some of that cost.
So are the calls just coming from Greene, or do you have services elsewhere? What kind do those other places influence the number of calls for the fire department too?
Yeah, you know, what we do, I guess our strategy is that we try to have the number of people on duty for what is most likely going to happen. We can't really staff for what could happen, for everything that's possible. So to help us deal with that difference between you're going to have this number of people here because of what's probably going to happen, and the number of people we might need if it does happen,
Right.
we rely on our neighbors for that. And our neighbors, similarly, they rely on us. We call it mutual aid. So we have agreements with all of our surrounding communities, these mutual aid agreements, that if they need help, we send resources to them. And in return, if we need help, they send resources to us. And we do that. We don't charge them for that. They don't charge us for that. So we just help each other in the time of need.
Can you name some of the cities?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Coventry, New Franklin,
Okay.
Jackson Township, Greentown, Uniontown, Springfield,
Okay.
Lakemore. And it
Yeah,
can
we're
even
all over.
expand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we kind of went in a circle around Green there, but it could expand beyond that.
Yeah.
You know. And I guess just to give you an idea of how many times does it happen, in 2015, we provided mutual aid to our neighbors 78 times, and they provided mutual aid to us 90 times.
Okay.
So it's close to even. In some years, the ratios are the other way. But yeah,
It's nice that you can rely on other cities for help if you need it.
we have to rely on each other. That's right.
Is the fire station prepared for
Yes.
any type of emergency, or sometimes do you have to rely on other cities?
We absolutely want to be prepared for any emergency, but there are some situations that arise that require a lot of specialized training or special equipment. An example would be perhaps we have a confined space rescue, so someone in a small enclosed kind of space. The way things are, it's another version of mutual aid. Okay, so
Yeah.
within Summit County, which we're in Summit County, there is a specialized team. And so collectively, the county has put together a team that has that equipment and has trained people. And so each one of the fire departments have a few members that are trained to do those sorts of things. And if one of those specialized rescue kind of situation comes up, then the county team pulls together to effect that rescue. Just like the hazmat team
Yeah.
and water rescue,
Yeah.
but the dive
The
team.
dive team.
Yes.
So, like,
those
say,
similar kinds of things.
Like in Jackson, they weren't prepared for like a dive mission, like rescue thing. Then Green would come and help them out.
Yes, sir.
With what we have.
That's
Okay.
right.
What are your future plans for the City of Green Fire Department?
When we consider future plans, there's a couple of unique things, I guess, that are happening right now. One of them involves our dispatch center. We have a consolidated dispatch center. In the City of Green, we dispatch for the City of Green, for Springfield Township Fire and EMS, the Village of Lakemore Fire and EMS, and Coventry Township Fire and EMS. There has been a big push in the region to further consolidate. To regionalize the dispatch center. And so we have, that's very much on our radar right now, is determining what's going to happen with our dispatch center. And I certainly understand the economies of scale that you can get from regionalization of a dispatch center, but we just want to be real careful that we still have the same level of service after a consolidation that we do right now before a further consolidation. So we've got to work through those issues. Another thing that you mentioned is a Station 3. Mm-hmm. Is there potential, is there some way that we can come up with an arrangement to develop that third station? And then another interesting thing that's happening to us, just with the age of the personnel that we have in our department and in the life cycle of our department, we've had quite a bit of turnover. And so we have some new officers that are coming online that have been promoted as we've had other members retire. So we have some very valuable, very senior, very experienced members of the department that have been retiring in this 2 to 4 year window. And so we have a whole new crop that's coming up to take their place. And so we're going to have a real emphasis on leadership development and officer training and those kind of things. And then I have one more for you. I hope that we can work on expanding our service into some form of community paramedicine. At the moment, it seems as though the people have some issue obtaining access to their primary medical care. And there's a lot of people that the way that they get into the medical system is through a trip to the ER.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the most efficient. way for the wider system, for a trip to the ER. So there may be some potential, some way to develop and grow the service that we provide, where maybe we're doing some home visits, or we are doing some fall prevention in the home, or just some of those things to try to avoid, trips to the ER. So
Now,
we'll see about developing our service there.
What about like pharmacies? Because I know Giant Eagle has pharmacies. There's
Yes.
other stores that sell medicines. Are you talking about like off-the-counter medicine?
Xavier, one of the ways that it could come up is not that the fire department would at all be involved in dispensing or providing or whatever those kind of medications, but an issue that does come up for some people at home is just compliance with their medications. Are they taking them as they've been prescribed?
Right.
So that might be an area where just some home visits and making sure that people are on track and following their doctor's orders could then potentially help avoid some trips to the ER and some overcrowding of the hospitals and more efficient, I guess, delivery of service.
And I know there's some technology that does the same thing. It tells them what to do, when to take it. Do you think you're down be in competition with that? Because that might be a problem that might pop up.
Yes. Xavier, that's an interesting point. That certainly could happen. And so then I think it would probably come down to the cost. Or would it come down to where we're the ones who are providing that technology? Maybe we take that technology with us and we do some telemedicine kind of things. Maybe there's a doctor on the one end and we have our iPad and we're doing a FaceTime with their doctor, in their home. I don't know where it could go, but I like what you're thinking. Okay. We want to investigate those possibilities.
You talked about fall prevention with the elderly a little bit.
Yeah.
What things can people do to prevent having to call the fire department?
Oh, very good. There are lots of checklist kinds of things, some prevention tips and all those sorts of things. A great resource for that is actually the State Fire Marshal's office website. Okay, now of course I forgot to memorize that before I came and joined you on the show. But if you Googled State Fire Marshal, they have a whole section on their webpage that has a number of checklists and things like that you can go through to eliminate hazards in your house and in your home.
Okay.
Do you know what kind of things are on that list?
Some things are, if we specifically look at, we'll say, elderly fall prevention. Lots of times people have those very decorative throw rugs, that are in place, and those become such a trip hazard, especially if you consider, moving a walker down the hallway and you have those things there. Grab rails in the bathroom, that certainly is an issue. Lighting often becomes an issue. Is it well lit enough? And general housekeeping issues. Is it free of clutter? Is it clear? Do we have open spaces to move through? So lots of things like that.
Does the fire station have programs to teach people these things of prevention?
That is not, we talked about that might be an area where we can develop and where we can grow. We don't currently have that as a service.
Okay.
And part of it is, boy, there's a lot of good ideas out there.
Yeah.
We have this many people though, and that many things we could do.
Right.
So we do have to pick and choose a little bit, but as we think about an area where we could grow and value that we can add to the community, that is something that we've been looking at is developing that community risk reduction kind of program. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on the show today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you both.
It's been really exciting.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Great.
And
And we would also like to thank you for joining us today. We deeply appreciate your support in watching the Bulldog Beat on the Bulldog Buzz today.
the City of Greene Fire Department contributes services to those who seek help. An increase in fire calls demands a personal and professional responsibility to become much more aware of our surroundings, to prevent injury and tragedy, and to establish Greene as a safe community for everyone.
For more information on the fire department or how you can take part in safety and prevention, visit the city's website at www.cityofgreene.org.
And thank you for joining us today on GCTV Channel 16. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for an upcoming show, please contact our Bulldog Beat advisor, Julie McMahon, at mcmahonjulie@greenlocalschools.org. We would love to hear from you.
The Bulldog Beat hopes we have succeeded our mission to intrigue you with the latest insight on our community news. The Bulldog Buzz is student filmed and edited and brought to you by the Bulldog Beat in Green Local Schools.
And thanks again for watching. I'm Xavier.
And I'm Ella.
And as always, go Bulldogs.